Emma stood at her grandmother's grave, the cold wind biting at her cheeks, mixing with the warmth of the tears that streamed down her face. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the small cemetery where friends and family had gathered to pay their last respects. The mood was somber, a stark contrast to the vibrant life her grandmother had led. As she clutched the delicate locket that hung around her neck, a cherished gift from her grandmother, Emma felt the weight of loss pressing heavily on her chest. Around her, hushed conversations floated in the air, punctuated by the occasional laughter as memories were shared. Emma could hear snippets of stories about her grandmother's kindness, her infectious laughter, and the way she always made the best apple pie on Thanksgiving. Each word was a dagger, reminding Emma of the void that now existed in her life. She closed her eyes, allowing the memories to wash over her. "I'll keep your memory alive, Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "I promise." As the ceremony drew to a close, Emma felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. She turned to see Jake, her husband, standing beside her. His eyes were filled with concern, and he offered her a soft smile, though it didn't quite reach the corners of his mouth. "Let's go home," he said quietly, wrapping an arm around her waist. The warmth of his embrace provided a small comfort, but Emma sensed an underlying tension in his demeanor, one that made her heart race with an unexplainable urgency. The drive home was filled with silence, the kind that envelops you when words feel inadequate. Emma gazed out of the window, the familiar streets of their small town blurring by. She thought about how her grandmother had always been her anchor, the one person who understood her completely. Now, she felt lost, suspended in a sea of grief and nostalgia. Jake glanced at her occasionally, his brow furrowed as if he was wrestling with his own thoughts. Once they arrived home, Emma stepped inside, the familiar scent of their home wrapping around her like a blanket. The walls were adorned with pictures of their shared memories, but today, they felt like reminders of her sorrow. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself as she entered the living room. There, she found Linda, Jake's mother, seated on the couch, her expression unreadable. "Emma," Linda said, her voice tinged with a mix of sympathy and something else, something Emma couldn't quite place. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." "Thank you, Linda," Emma replied, forcing a smile. "It's been a hard day." Linda nodded, her gaze drifting towards Jake, who had moved to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. Emma watched as he leaned against the counter, his posture tense, and a flicker of concern crossed her mind. She approached him, hoping to find solace in his presence. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice low. "Yeah, just tired," he replied, avoiding her gaze. "It's been a long day for everyone." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, but something in her gut told her that there was more beneath the surface. They had always shared everything, but today felt different. "I think I need to change and just process everything," she said, wanting to escape the heaviness of the moment. "Sure, take your time," Jake said, finally looking at her. "I'll be right here." As Emma walked towards their bedroom, she felt a strange urge to eavesdrop on Linda and Jake's conversation. She paused outside the door, hearing their voices, but the words were indistinct. Curiosity piqued, she quietly opened the door to her closet and slipped inside, the darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. The closet was cramped, filled with clothes and memories, but Emma didn't mind. She pressed her ear against the door, straining to catch every word. "The will is going to change everything," Linda said, her tone low and conspiratorial. "We need to be prepared for what's coming." "What do you mean?" Jake replied, his voice tight. "She didn't leave us anything, did she?" "Not directly, but there are ways we can maneuver this to our advantage," Linda said, her voice dropping even lower. "If Emma is left with nothing, it might be easier for us to manage things." Emma's heart raced as she listened, the implications of Linda's words sending chills down her spine. She had always believed that family was bound by loyalty and love, but now she was confronted with the reality of hidden motives and possible betrayal. "Mom, we can't just take advantage of her grief," Jake said, his voice rising slightly. Emma could hear the tension in his tone, and she pressed herself against the wall, trying to remain silent. "She's been through enough." "Think practically, Jake. This is about survival," Linda insisted, her voice sharp. "You know how hard things have been. If there's a chance to improve our situation, we can't ignore it." Emma's breath hitched in her throat. She felt a mix of anger and confusion swirling within her. Why was Jake so compliant with Linda's manipulative schemes? Did he truly not care about her feelings? As the conversation continued, Emma's heart sank further into despair. She couldn't believe that the people she trusted the most were discussing her grandmother's legacy as if it were merely a financial transaction. The world outside seemed to fade away, and all that remained was the echo of her mother-in-law's voice, laced with greed. Emma clenched her fists, torn between confronting them and remaining hidden in the shadows. Just then, Jake's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mom, I don't know if I can go along with this. Emma deserves better than to be treated like a pawn in our game." Emma's heart surged with hope, but it was quickly crushed by Linda's sharp retort. "You need to think about what's best for us, Jake. We can't let her hold us back." Emma felt a flood of emotions, betrayal, anger, sadness, crashing over her like waves. She wanted to burst out of the closet and confront them, to demand answers, but her body felt heavy with uncertainty. As the conversation continued, Emma realized she was standing at a crossroads. The truth was unraveling before her, but she was afraid to step into the light. The darkness of the closet felt safer, but it was becoming increasingly suffocating. Finally, she took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She would not be a victim of their schemes. She would reclaim her narrative, her grandmother's memory, and her own identity. With a flicker of determination, Emma prepared to step out of the closet and face the reality that awaited her. But just as she was about to emerge, she caught a glimpse of the locket around her neck. It shimmered in the dim light, a reminder of the bond she had with her grandmother. "I will find the truth," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding with a newfound sense of purpose, no matter the cost. And with that, she took one last breath, steeling herself for the confrontation that awaited her in the living room. Emma was ready to step into the uncertain future, armed with the knowledge that she could no longer be passive in her own life. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was prepared to face them head-on. Emma huddled in the dimly lit closet, her heart thundering in her chest, as she strained to catch every word of the conversation drifting in from the living room. She could barely believe her ears. The weight of their discussion pressed heavily on her. Jake and Linda, her husband and mother-in-law, were talking about her grandmother's will, a subject that felt both intimate and invasive. Emma felt as if she were an intruder in her own life, exposed to secrets that should never have been revealed in her presence. "Jake, you know this could change everything for us." Linda's voice was sharp, laced with a tension that sent chills down Emma's spine. "What do you mean, Mom?" Jake's tone was defensive, but there was an underlying current of uncertainty in it that Emma had never noticed before. "Grandma's will is just a will. It's not going to change who we are." "Don't be naive," Linda shot back, her voice rising slightly. She left everything to Emma. "You know how this town talks. If she's suddenly wealthy, people will wonder why. They'll speculate, they'll dig into her past, and you know what they'll find, or what they might think they find." Emma's stomach twisted. The thought of her grandmother's legacy being questioned felt like a betrayal in itself. Her mind raced back to the funeral, to the way everyone had spoken of her grandmother with such love and reverence. What could they possibly uncover that would tarnish her memory? "Mom, Emma loved her grandma. She deserves this," Jake said, his voice softer now, though Emma could hear the strain in it. "We can't control what people think." "Oh, please, Jake. You know how your family reacts to things like this. They'll turn her into some kind of spectacle, and you know what they'll say about you, about us." Linda's words dripped with disdain, each syllable a reminder of the expectations that seemed to hover over them like a dark cloud. Emma's heart sank. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. "What do you mean about us?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the tension in the room. "Mom, stop it," Jake replied, sounding exasperated now. "Emma is my wife. I don't care what anyone thinks. I love her." His declaration hung in the air, a fragile promise that felt more like a lifeline in a storm. Linda scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Jake. You know that as well as I do. If there are implications regarding her grandmother's estate, we need to be prepared. You should have been the one receiving that inheritance. Your grandmother always thought you'd end up with someone more suitable." Emma's breath hitched. More suitable? The words pierced through her like shards of glass. Was she not enough? Did her grandmother really think she deserved someone better than Jake? The very idea sent waves of insecurity crashing over her. "Mom, stop it," Jake said again, his voice rising with frustration. "You're being ridiculous. Emma is perfect for me. Grandma chose her for a reason." "Did she? Or did she just settle?" Linda shot back, her voice dripping with venom. "You know she never approved of your choice, Jake. Deep down, she thought you should have married someone else, someone who could reflect the family's values better." The air in the closet felt thick and suffocating. Emma's pulse quickened. She could hardly breathe as she listened to Linda's accusations. "Someone else." The phrase echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of her grandmother's opinions that she had never fully understood. What did Linda know that she didn't? "Mom, this isn't about you. This is about Emma and me," Jake said, his voice strained. "I don't want to hear any more of your nonsense." Emma's heart raced as she prepared to step out, to confront them, but then a sobering thought gripped her. What if they were right? What if her grandmother had kept secrets that would forever change how she viewed her marriage, her life? Just as she was about to make her presence known, she heard Linda's voice drop to a conspiratorial whisper. "Jake, there's more at stake here. There's something about your grandmother's past, something she never wanted anyone to know. If Emma finds out, it could ruin everything." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer to the closet door, her heart pounding in anticipation. What could possibly be so devastating? "Mom, what do you mean?" Jake sounded genuinely concerned now, and Emma felt a flicker of hope that perhaps he didn't know the truth either. "There's a reason your grandmother was so protective of her family's reputation," Linda continued. "There's an old family secret that could come to light if Emma starts digging. If she finds out about Richard—" "Richard?" Jake interrupted, his voice a mix of confusion and concern. "Who is Richard?" Emma's skin prickled at the mention of the name. She had seen old photographs of a man she didn't recognize, his face always obscured in the background of family gatherings. Who was this Richard, and why did he matter so much? Linda sighed, her voice lowering even further. He was someone from her past, someone she had to keep hidden. If Emma finds out about him, it'll cause chaos. Your grandmother would never forgive me if she knew I told you. Emma's heart raced. Chaos? Why did it feel like the walls of her life were closing in? She pressed her back against the wall of the closet, desperate to remain hidden, yet yearning to know more. "Mom, you're scaring me," Jake said, a tremor in his voice. "What are you talking about?" "Just promise me you'll be careful, Jake," Linda said, her voice softening, but the underlying tension remained. "You can't let Emma find out about Richard. If she does, it will change everything." Emma's mind spun as she absorbed the weight of Linda's words. What could possibly lie in the shadows of her grandmother's past that would bring about such fear? The thought of unearthing a family secret felt daunting, yet liberating. She had to know. As the conversation shifted to mundane topics, Emma's resolve hardened. She couldn't stay hidden any longer. She had to confront Jake, to demand answers. But in that moment, she felt the oppressive weight of doubt settle over her. The truth was a double-edged sword, and she was terrified of what she might uncover. Just as she prepared to step out of the closet, she heard Jake's voice again, his tone filled with desperation. "Mom, I love Emma. I'm not going to let anything come between us, not even this secret." Emma paused, a mix of hope and fear flooding through her. Did he really mean that? Or was it just another promise that could shatter under the weight of betrayal? The door creaked as she reached for the handle, but the sound felt deafening in the stillness of the room. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited her on the other side. There was no going back now. She had to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Emma," she whispered to herself. The name felt like a mantra. "You can do this. You deserve to know." With a final push, she opened the closet door, ready to step into the light, ready to confront the darkness lurking in her family's past. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing as she replayed the conversation she had overheard between Jake and Linda in her mind. The warmth of the sun had long faded from the room, replaced by an awkward silence that settled heavily around her. She could still hear Linda's words echoing in her ears, the implication that her marriage was somehow less than what she believed it to be. It felt as if a dark cloud had descended over her, blocking out any light of reassurance. Jake entered the room, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing within her. He smiled as he walked over, holding a plate of leftovers from dinner. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, his voice warm and inviting. Emma forced a smile, her stomach churning at the thought of the conversation that had shattered her peace. "Thanks," she replied, taking the plate but barely able to focus on the food. She set it down on the bedside table and turned her gaze to the window, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, his brow furrowing in concern. He sat down beside her, his presence comforting yet suffocating at the same time. "You seem a bit distant." "I'm fine," she answered quickly, almost too quickly. She hated the way her voice trembled, the way her heart raced at the thought of revealing the truth she had stumbled upon. But the weight of the hidden secrets was unbearable, and she felt a compulsion to address it. "Really?" Jake pressed, his tone shifting from concern to curiosity. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" Emma turned to face him, the gentle light illuminating his features, but all she could see was the man who had been having secret conversations with her mother-in-law. "I know," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just, with everything that happened today, I guess I'm still processing it." Jake nodded, though Emma could see the flicker of confusion in his eyes. "It was a tough day," he said, and she could tell he was trying to navigate her emotions delicately. "Your grandmother was a wonderful person. I'll miss her too." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her resolve, but the need for answers clawed at her insides. "About my grandmother's will," Emma began, her throat tightening as she spoke. "I wanted to ask you something." "Sure, anything," Jake replied, leaning in slightly, his eyes encouraging. "What do you think she wanted for us? I mean, financially?" Emma's heart raced as she watched Jake's expression shift from curiosity to caution. "She wanted us to be happy," he said slowly, as if weighing each word. "Everything else? Well, it's just stuff. We have each other, and that's what matters." Emma nodded, but his words felt evasive. She could sense the tension in the air, thickening like a fog that refused to dissipate. But what if there's more to it? What if she left something important behind? Jake's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flash of something. Fear, perhaps? "Why do you say that?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "I overheard you and Linda talking," she admitted, her voice trembling, "about the will and how it could affect our lives." He stiffened, the warmth of their moment evaporating as quickly as it had come. "Emma, you shouldn't have eavesdropped. It's not fair to jump to conclusions without knowing the whole story." The defensiveness in his tone struck her like a slap. "I was just trying to understand. You and Linda were discussing things that seemed serious. I deserve to know what's going on." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to associate with frustration. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just, there are family dynamics at play here that are complicated. I didn't want to burden you with it." "Complicated?" Emma echoed, her voice rising. "What's complicated about a will? It should be straightforward, shouldn't it?" "It's not that simple," he replied, his gaze darting away from hers. "There are feelings involved, history, things you might not understand. Things I might not understand. What does that mean?" Emma pressed, her heart racing with a mix of anger and confusion. "What are you hiding from me, Jake?" He hesitated, the silence stretching between them like a taut rope ready to snap. "I'm not hiding anything," he replied finally, but the uncertainty in his voice told another story. Emma felt torn, the desire to confront him battling with the instinct to protect their marriage. She loved Jake, but the rift that was forming between them felt insurmountable. The secrets, the lies that had been woven into their lives. How could she continue to ignore them? "I need to know the truth," she said, her voice trembling as she fought to keep tears at bay. "If there's something about my grandmother that I don't know, I deserve to hear it from you." Jake looked pained, as if her words were a physical blow. "I promise you, Emma, whatever it is, it's not as bad as you think. Your grandmother loved you. She wanted what was best for you." "But did she?" Emma challenged, her frustration boiling over. "Did she really want what was best for me, or did she want what was best for you and Linda? I can't shake the feeling that there's something more, something I'm not being told." The room fell silent again, the air thick with unspoken words and hidden truths. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that the very foundation of her life was built on questions that had no answers. Can we take a moment? Jake finally suggested, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Let's not rush into conclusions. Give me a chance to explain. Emma's heart sank. I just need time to think, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, he said quietly, and she could see the sadness in his eyes as he stood up, leaving her alone with her swirling thoughts. As the night deepened, Emma lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the corners of the room. The weight of the day pressed down on her chest, and the questions continued to churn in her mind. What was the truth behind her grandmother's will? What secrets did Jake and Linda hold? She knew she had to dig deeper, to unravel the threads of her family's past. Emma felt a surge of determination course through her, igniting a fire within. She needed answers, not just for herself, but for her grandmother's memory and the life she had built with Jake. With a newfound resolve, Emma decided she would not let the shadows of doubt consume her. She would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tomorrow, she would begin her search for answers, delving into her grandmother's past and unearthing the secrets that had long been buried. As she closed her eyes, Emma whispered a silent vow. She would find the truth, even if it meant unraveling the very fabric of her life. And with that promise, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by the shadows of the past, yet fueled by the hope of clarity that awaited her. Emma stood in the dim light of her grandmother's living room, the air thick with nostalgia and loss. The house, though still familiar, felt foreign now that the woman who had filled it with love was gone. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams filtering through the lace curtains, and Emma felt a pang of longing for the days spent here, wrapped in her grandmother's warmth. Today, however, she wasn't just reminiscing, she was searching for answers. With a deep breath, she made her way to the small study tucked away at the back of the house. The door creaked as she entered, revealing shelves lined with books, each one a testament to her grandmother's rich life. Emma's fingers trailed along the spines, brushing against the leather-bound volumes that smelled of time and wisdom. She had spent countless afternoons here, listening to her grandmother's stories about love, dreams, and resilience. Now, those stories felt like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered, and Emma was determined to find them. As she opened the desk drawer, a cloud of dust puffed out, making her sneeze. Inside, she found a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her heart raced as she carefully unbound them, the paper yellowed with age. Each envelope bore her grandmother's elegant handwriting, and as she read through the letters, the words painted a picture of a life filled with joy and heartache. Yet, it was one letter in particular that caught her eye. "To my dearest Elizabeth," it began, and Emma's breath hitched in her throat. Her grandmother's name was Elizabeth, but this letter was signed by someone named Richard. The ink was smudged but legible, and as Emma read, the words revealed a love that had never been mentioned in her family's lore. "My love for you has never waned, even in the shadows of our lives. I wish for nothing but your happiness, but I cannot bear the thought of losing you to another," it continued, each line deepening the knot of confusion in Emma's stomach. Who was this Richard, and why had her grandmother kept this relationship a secret? The letter hinted at a clandestine love affair, a world away from the warm memories Emma held close. "What the hell?" Emma whispered to herself, her voice cracking. She felt as though she were holding a fragile thread that could unravel her entire understanding of her family. Had her grandmother led a double life? The implications were staggering. Emma's mind raced to the conversation she had overheard between Jake and Linda, the bitterness and resentment that had echoed through the living room. Could it be that her grandmother's choices had cast shadows on their lives too? With shaking hands, she placed the letter back in the drawer, her thoughts swirling like a tempest. Emma knew she needed to dig deeper. There had to be more clues hidden away in this house, more fragments of the past that could illuminate the truth. She spent the next hour sifting through old photographs, albums filled with smiles and laughter, but the joy felt tainted now. Faces she recognized were accompanied by an overwhelming sense of betrayal. As she flipped through the pages, one photograph caught her eye, a faded snapshot of her grandmother standing beside a man who looked strikingly familiar. The man had dark hair and a charming smile that reminded her of Jake. She frowned, pushing aside the unsettling thought. Surely it was just a coincidence. Emma's heart raced as she continued searching, determined to find more connections, more pieces to the puzzle. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Emma felt the weight of the day pressing down on her, a mixture of exhaustion and anxiety. She had uncovered a family secret that changed everything, but what should she do with this knowledge? Confronting Jake felt daunting. She could already envision the fallout. Would he deny it? Would he accuse her of overreacting? Her thoughts echoed in her mind as she made her way back home, the weight of the world on her shoulders. The familiar streets felt different, as if each house was a witness to her internal struggle. When she finally stepped through the door, the scent of home enveloped her, yet it felt tainted by the shadows of her discovery. Jake was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. He glanced up and smiled, but the warmth in his eyes felt distant. "Hey, Em, how was your day?" he asked, his voice bright, but Emma could sense an undercurrent of tension. She hesitated, the letter still fresh in her mind. It was all right," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just went through some old things at Grandma's house." "Did you find anything interesting?" Jake asked, turning back to the stove. Emma watched him, his back to her, and felt a surge of frustration. Did he have any idea of the storm brewing inside her? "Yeah, actually," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found a letter. From a man named Richard." Jake froze momentarily, but when he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "Richard? I don't think I've heard that name before." Emma crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she couldn't help. "He wrote to her about love. Deep love, Jake. Why didn't anyone ever mention this? What else don't we know about her life?" Jake's brow furrowed, and he stepped closer, concern etched on his face. Before he could finish, Linda entered the room, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. "Dinner's almost ready. I hope you're both starving," she announced cheerfully, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Just talking about Grandma," Emma said flatly, her eyes darting to Linda. "You knew about Richard, didn't you?" Linda paused, her smile faltering for a moment. "Richard? Oh, that was long ago. It's not important now." "Not important?" Emma challenged, her voice rising slightly. "Why did no one ever mention him? There's something more here, isn't there?" Linda exchanged a glance with Jake, and Emma felt the air grow thick with unspoken words. "Sweetheart, your grandmother had a complicated life, but it's not something we need to dwell on. She loved you." "Loved me?" Emma cut in, her heart racing. "What kind of love was that if it was built on secrets? You both need to tell me the truth." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Emma, you're being dramatic. You don't understand the whole story." "Then tell me," Emma implored, her frustration boiling over, "because I'm tired of living in the dark about my own family." Just then, Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, a distraction that felt almost timely. She pulled it out, her heart racing as she saw a message from an unknown number. It read, "I know about Richard. Meet me at the park tomorrow at noon if you want the truth." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The world around her blurred as she looked between Jake and Linda, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to leap into the abyss of her family's secrets. What had she uncovered, and what more lay ahead? "Emma?" Jake's voice broke through her thoughts, but she was already lost in her own turmoil, the message resonating in her mind. "What do you want to do?" I need time to think," she murmured, her heart racing. She had to confront the truth, whatever it may be, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. As she stepped back, the weight of her discoveries hung heavily on her shoulders. She needed answers, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Emma knew one thing for sure: her life would never be the same again. Emma stood in the doorway, her heart racing as she gathered her courage to confront Jake and Linda. The living room was filled with a palpable tension, the air thick with unspoken words and hidden truths. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with the implications of what she had discovered in her grandmother's house. The letter from Richard loomed large in her thoughts, a piece of a puzzle that felt impossibly complex. "Can I interrupt?" Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. Jake and Linda turned to her, their expressions a mix of surprise and apprehension. She could see the flicker of guilt in Jake's eyes, and it made her stomach churn. "What is it, Emma?" Jake asked, his tone cautious. He shifted slightly, as if preparing for a confrontation. Emma stepped further into the room, her fists clenched at her sides. "I found a letter from someone named Richard. It was addressed to Grandma, and it hinted at a relationship that none of us ever knew about." The words spilled out, each one heavy with the weight of betrayal. Linda's face paled, and she exchanged a quick glance with Jake, who seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "What are you talking about?" Linda finally managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. "That doesn't mean anything. People write letters all the time." "But this letter was different," Emma pressed on, her voice rising with passion. "It spoke of love, of longing. Grandma never mentioned him. Why? What else don't I know about her life?" Jake's expression hardened, and he stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Emma, you need to calm down. You have to understand that people have pasts. It doesn't mean anything for us now." His voice was steady, but Emma could hear the nervousness beneath it. "Doesn't mean anything?" Emma laughed bitterly, the sound echoing through the room. "How can you say that? This changes everything. If Grandma had a relationship hidden like this, what other secrets are there?" Linda's face twisted in discomfort, but she quickly regained composure. "Emma, you're overreacting. It was a fling from long ago. Your grandmother had a life before she settled down. It doesn't concern us." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. "But it does concern us. If she had a secret like this, what else was she hiding? What did you know, Jake?" She turned to him, her eyes searching for the truth. "Did you know about Richard? Did you know about the letter?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He glanced at Linda, whose expression was a mix of fear and defiance. "Emma, just tell me the truth," Emma interrupted, her voice rising. "Did you know?" Finally, Jake sighed, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. "Yes, I knew about the letter. But it was just a moment in time, Emma. It didn't mean anything. Grandma moved on, and so should we." "Moved on?" Emma echoed, incredulous. "You think I can just forget that my grandmother had a hidden life? That she had feelings for someone else? That she kept secrets from her family?" Jake looked at her, his eyes softening. "Emma, I didn't want to hurt you. I thought you'd be able to separate the past from the present. This is about your grandmother, not us." "But it's about us too, Jake," Emma shot back, her frustration bubbling over. "If she had a twin sister, what does that say about our family? What else don't we know? What if this Richard isn't just a fling? What if he's part of a bigger story that we're not aware of?" At this, Linda's composure finally cracked. "Enough! You don't know what you're talking about, Emma," she snapped, her voice rising to match Emma's. "You have no idea what you're delving into." Emma felt a cold chill settle in the pit of her stomach. "What do you mean? What are you hiding?" Linda took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "Your grandmother had a twin sister, Emma. A sister who was disowned by the family. That's not something we just talked about over dinner." The words hung in the air, a heavy silence following her revelation. Emma's breath caught in her throat. A twin sister? The words felt foreign, heavy with implications that churned her insides. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because it's complicated," Linda replied, frustration seeping into her voice. "Your grandmother was ashamed of her sister. She wanted nothing to do with her, and we respected that. Richard was her father. He left her mother for your grandmother. We didn't want to drag that into our family." The room felt like it was closing in on Emma. Every word was a nail in the coffin of her understanding of her family. "So, all this time, I had a family member, and I didn't even know it?" Emma asked, her voice cracking. "Emma, please try to understand," Jake said, reaching for her arm. "This doesn't change how I feel about you. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman, and she raised you right. That's what matters." "But it changes everything!" Emma's voice rose again, fueled by confusion and betrayal. "How can I trust anything? How can I trust you?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Jake insisted, his voice earnest. "I thought you would be better off not knowing about the past. The family had enough pain without dragging up old wounds." Emma stepped back, shaking her head. "But you should have told me. You should have trusted me enough to share this. It feels like we're built on lies." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the words failed him. Linda stood beside him, a silent observer to the unraveling of their lives. Emma felt an overwhelming need to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the living room. "I need some air," she murmured, before turning and walking away. She could feel their eyes on her as she stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting her like a wave. She walked down the street, her mind racing. The revelations about her grandmother and the hidden twin sister spiraled in her thoughts. Emma felt unmoored, as though the ground beneath her was shifting. The family she thought she knew was cloaked in secrets and half-truths. She wanted to scream, to cry, to do something to release the pent-up emotions threatening to overwhelm her. As she walked, she thought of her grandmother, the woman she had loved so deeply. How could she have kept such a significant part of her life hidden? Emma felt a mix of anger and sorrow, grappling with the loss of the image she had always held of her family. What else were they hiding? What other secrets lay buried beneath the surface? She felt an overwhelming urge to dig deeper, to uncover the truth of her family history, no matter how painful it might be. Her heart raced as she considered her next steps. There was so much more to discover, and she couldn't let fear or betrayal hold her back. Emma's resolve hardened. She would find out the truth, no matter what it took. Emma sat in the living room, the weight of Linda's revelation crashing down on her like a tidal wave. The room felt stifling, each second stretching painfully as she struggled to process the bombshell. She looked at Jake, his expression a mixture of concern and confusion, but all she could feel was the churning chaos inside her. The family she thought she knew, the life she had built, felt like a fragile facade, ready to crumble with the slightest push. "Emma, please say something," Jake implored, his voice breaking the heavy silence. He reached out, but Emma instinctively recoiled, creating a chasm between them. She could see the hurt in his eyes, but it was overshadowed by a gnawing sense of betrayal that consumed her. "How long have you known?" she finally managed to ask, her voice low and trembling with suppressed anger. The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Jake hesitated, glancing at Linda, who had retreated to the corner of the room, her expression unreadable. "I didn't know, not at first. I found out about the letter a few months ago. I thought it was just a past fling, something that didn't matter anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't matter?" Emma echoed incredulously, her emotions boiling over. "This changes everything. You let me walk around with this illusion of a perfect family while you knew I was living a lie. Emma, I swear I thought it was just a part of her past. I didn't think it would affect you, affect us," Jake pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. Emma shook her head, feeling the tears threaten to spill over. "And what about your mother? Did she know too? Did you both just decide that I didn't deserve the truth?" Linda stepped forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Emma, it was complicated. Your grandmother didn't want to talk about her past. She buried it for a reason. We thought it was better to leave it be." "Better for who?" Emma shot back, her voice rising. "Better for you, so you could continue living your lives without having to face the reality of who you are? This isn't just about my grandmother anymore. This is about my whole family, my life." The room was thick with tension, each word a dagger. Emma felt the familiar warmth of anger surge through her, but beneath it lay a deep sadness that threatened to break her. She turned away from Jake, unable to bear the sight of his confusion any longer. "Emma, please," Jake said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I love you. We can get through this together. Just give me a chance to explain." She couldn't look at him. Instead, she focused on a small trinket on the mantel, a porcelain figurine her grandmother had cherished. It felt like a symbol of the innocence that had been shattered. "You don't understand," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time. I need to think." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving Jake and Linda in a stunned silence. She felt the cool air of the hallway as she moved towards their bedroom, her heart racing with the urgency to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Inside the bedroom, Emma opened the closet and began to pull clothes from the hangers, her hands shaking. She needed to get away from Jake, away from Linda, away from the lies that had poisoned her life. Each piece of clothing felt heavier than the last, weighted with memories of happier times that now seemed tainted. "Where are you going?" Jake's voice broke through the haze of her thoughts as he appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "Just somewhere else," she replied tersely, not meeting his gaze. "I need to be alone right now." "Emma, you can't just run away from this. We need to talk," he insisted, stepping closer, but she held up a hand as if to ward him off. "I don't want to talk, Jake. I need space to figure this out," she said, her voice rising again. "You don't get to make this about you. "Then let me help you," he said, his tone shifting to one of desperation. "Just tell me what you need." Emma paused, her heart aching at the sight of him, so earnest and yet so far removed from the support she needed. "I don't need you right now. I just need to breathe." With that, she turned her back to him, continuing to pack her things in silence. The room felt like a whirlwind, memories of their life together spinning around her, taunting her with a false sense of security. She needed to escape this reality, if only for a little while. As she rummaged through the closet, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A small envelope slipped out from the folds of a summer dress. Curious, she pulled it out and opened it, revealing a photograph that took her breath away. Her grandmother stood in the foreground, a youthful smile lighting up her face. But it was the man beside her that caught Emma's attention. Richard, the name from the letter, was unmistakable. However, it was the figure in the background that sent chills down her spine. Jake. Emma's heart raced as she examined the photograph more closely. The resemblance was uncanny. The man in the picture had the same striking features, the same playful grin that she loved. It was as if she were staring at a ghost from the past, one that had lingered too long in their lives. "What else don't I know?" she whispered, the realization crashing over her like ice water. The implications were staggering, and Emma felt her entire world tilt on its axis. The photo trembled in her hands as she sank onto the bed, the weight of her discoveries pressing down on her. Was it possible that Jake was connected to this secret in ways she couldn't yet comprehend? Was their love tainted by the very history she was trying to escape? She felt a surge of panic rise within her. How could she face him again? The thought of confronting the man she loved, the man she thought she knew, with the chilling possibility that he was somehow intertwined with her grandmother's hidden past, was almost too much to bear. Images of their wedding day flashed through her mind, his laughter, the promises they made, the dreams they shared. But now, each memory felt like a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that was beginning to crack under the weight of the truth. Emma's hands trembled as she held the photograph, her mind racing with questions. What had she stumbled into? What secrets were buried beneath the surface of her family's history? And most importantly, how could she ever trust Jake again when everything felt tainted by doubt? As the silence enveloped her, the enormity of her situation settled in. She needed answers, but she also needed time to process what she had uncovered. Emma took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of resolve and fear. She would confront Jake, but not tonight. Tonight, she needed to be alone with her thoughts. With one last glance at the photo, Emma placed it carefully on the bedside table, a haunting reminder of the secrets that lay ahead. She stood up, gathered her things, and with a final glance at the door that led to her past, she stepped out into the night, determined to find her way through the darkness that threatened to consume her.